Hello and welcome to The Print. Over last few months, there have been a lot of discussion around the E20 blend petrol and its impact on the automotive vehicles. To discuss more on this, today I'm joined by Mr. Vinay Piparsania, who is a mechanical engineer from IIT Delhi and is an automotive veteran with over 35 years of experience across product development, marketing, sales, and after sales. He has also held senior leadership positions across Ford Motor Company, BMW, Hero Group, and TVS Group across India, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Currently, he is the founder of Millenstrat Advisory and Research. Hello, sir, and welcome to The Print.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you and your audience.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, I'm just going to start with you by asking how do you assess the progress and the development of India's ethanol blending program with regards to the automotive industry?
So let me set a context.
Yeah.
Fuel change has nothing new. Fuel changes and technology evolution has been occurring for years and decades. And India has been through its own. And India, more or less, has never done any new innovation or novel innovation. It has always followed the engineering and developments that have happened in other markets and started to adopt it in India. So it's always been a follower. And that's exactly the same thing with ethanol. Ethanol blending is not new. Vehicle manufacturers around the world have designed engines and fuel systems for ethanol blended fuels for decades now. In markets such as Brazil, the United States, and Thailand, it's already been there for years. So the engineering question was largely answered before India even began this rollout. So it's never been an engineering issue. What we're seeing in India today is a very different problem. It's the pace of the fuel transition, which has run ahead of two things. First, the readiness of the vehicle population. That's the vehicle park that we've had for several years, and the clarity of communication to consumers. I would like to use this conversation to separate the genuine technical concerns from the ordinary wear and tear that happens anyway, right? That is happening and is attributed to the way we are using the any fuel, not just this ethanol fuel.
Yeah.
And I want to also, discuss the financial anxiety that I think many owners are feeling, because this concern is real and it deserves clear, honest answers, not just reassurance, but actual technical confirmation. So I'd be happy to do that for you.
Yeah. So, sir, do you think that the current in the India's petrol vehicles that are already on the roads, like how many are compatible with the E20 fuel, and are there significant gaps?
So, to be very honest, let's be clear. E20 is the vehicles that were compatible have only happened over the last 3 years, between 2023 and now. Before that, our vehicles were suitable for for ethanol mixtures, but the variations and the percentage would have to be re-engineered according to the, whatever strategy the market was being to choose. So most vehicles today are valid and tested for E20. The larger concern, which is where our consumers and all our customers and the public is really interested in, is the existing fleet. And those are tens to 10 millions of vehicles. So, for example, if you see the car park, which is the total population of vehicles, two-wheelers, we would be about 230, 250 million in the country. And for four-wheelers, we would be between 45 to 50 million vehicles. Out of that, 40 million vehicles, four-wheelers, would be below the 2023 mark. And about 200 million would be legacy two-wheelers that would be not configured, but would maybe we have to check their suitability for E20. They're not compatible, but they could be suitable.
So, sir, in that sense, do you think that India's ethanol blending program has rapidly evolved, especially in the last 5 years? Because E5 fuel is something that we were using, early 2010s and so on, and E10 fuel become a norm in I think 2022, and then now we are in current financial year we are already at E20. So, do you think that the transition was very quicker?
So, to be honest, I would say that we did not follow the same playbook that we followed for earlier transitions. So, if you look back in the late 2000, early in the 1990s, and in the early 2000s, we had leaded and unleaded. Now, why did we do that? It was basically for the toxicity that was there, but that was also tetraethyl lead. And the mixture was changed just because we needed to make sure that the vehicles that we have now don't release those toxic emissions. And there were a lot of changes that had to take place in the engine, done very smoothly. And we had a transition which is also very smooth. We had unleaded and leaded as options. And all new vehicles eventually transitioned and went into clearly into unleaded later. We had catalytic converters. We had so many more components that had to come. There was public communication. There were, a strategy for the older vehicles, communications done not only by the motor manufacturers, but also by the oil companies. The oil company, the network, and the ecosystem were geared up for it. And then, of course, we had also the spare parts and the service side of the business also come up to the trading and expectations and parts availability. And the whole point was it was communicated really well. Then we went from Bharat Stage 1 all the way to Bharat Stage 6, followed a similar kind of, slow timeline, progressive timeline, kept in mind how many vehicles were before, what was the engineering requirement, the certification, and then the oil companies also reassured everyone that they were ready. And then the switch was sort of done in a very seamless manner, which is what engineering is about. Everything should be seamless. The customer should not know it. And that's to the point what is happening with E20. So as you mentioned, we went from E5, E10, all going smoothly. This E20 also actually was being done in a very calibrated way. If you think about it, it started around 2022. We had a few cities that were offering it. All those oil, pumps were very declaring that we're offering E20, and this is like a fuel that's being tested at that time. And then suddenly, and without any kind of communication, you're saying, no, now all pumps are offering E20. That's great for new vehicles, but what about all the older vehicles? There was no communication how they would be handled. And what was it that they would need to be in readiness for? And what about the oil companies? The oil companies also had to declare their readiness, their whole network, because they also needed to change their whole distribution and storage and protocols for how any contamination would be treated, what would be the resolution for that. So somewhere along the way, this was just hurried. It's not necessarily the fuel. And again, I'm telling you, the fuel has been there for years. The engineering of vehicles were prepared. We've been exporting these vehicles much before India sort of started to introduce E20 vehicles. So we were ready. The engineering part was ready. It was the communication part and how the oil companies were also, at their front facing with customers and with vehicles. And what about the 400, okay, only let's say 1/5 of the vehicles are E20 compatible. What about the ones which were before that? What did they have to do? What was their responsibility? So that communication was not out. And therefore, if you even see the panic that's happening, the incidences that we're talking about, it's for vehicles which are before the E20 compatibility. So we need to, I would say very clearly demarcate the difference between the two. Before, after, it's about the before vehicles, which is a very large population, very diverse ages of vehicle, going back all the way up to maybe Bharat Stage 2. So all this in India is very normal. It was managed very, very well in earlier transitions. Somehow the other, we did not follow a similar pattern or a protocol in this one. This is where I believe the real issues have started to come up, and customers felt that they were not involved, they were not prepared, they had no recourse of who to ask, what does it mean for them? And of course, there was an economic impact that they were immediately really feeling with regards to mileage and some possible damages to their vehicles that technicians who are also not prepared to diagnose or provide the necessary solution, they're just replacing parts. So there's a host of things that have happened because we didn't follow the disciplines that we followed earlier. That's my view of it.
So, sir, like as you mentioned, so the owners, in your opinion, were of the non E20 compliant vehicles, specifically from before 2023, were not adequately informed about the impact of the E20 fuel. So, do you think that the automotive vehicle manufacturers were also taken, a bit by surprise when E20 rolled out like a standard fuel?
Not at all. I don't think the auto manufacturers were taken by surprise at all. These
Hmm.
kind of technical assessments and decisions are fortunately provided early on because there's a lot of development time that has to take place. And then there's testing, then there is, type approvals, homologation, all those things have to happen. And for most auto manufacturers, this was very sort of a very standard engineering change. And there are, cycle planning that we do in our product development, which follow a very clear timeline. They introduced the vehicles, right? But the point was is that the fuel got introduced without a solution for prior owners. And this is not a vehicle change. This is a fuel change. Please let me repeat that.
Yeah.
We have changed the fuel. The fuel means that the characteristics and properties of that fuel are different from the ones that we're using earlier. Petrol, which is fossil fuel, has a certain composition. Ethanol has a very different property and characteristics. Even if it's blended, the characteristics of the blended fuel also change. The engineering has been adapted, it has been very clearly made out. The real challenge is, was the ecosystem ready? These vehicles, this fuel have to be treated differently. It has to be handled differently because of different properties, especially being hygroscopic, which means that it can absorb water.
Yeah.
It means that it is subject to more sensitivity to moisture and therefore needs to have much better storage handling conditions. Also, because of the blend, the tolerances that need to be managed in the vehicle as well as along in the ecosystem also have to be developed. So I know about the vehicles part. That was done years ago. That was type approved. They're certified. All the vehicle manufacturers are saying E20 compatible, etc. You can get that on the vehicle specs and handbooks also. With regards to the oil companies, how are they verifying the blend? How are they confirming that the that the transportation of these are being done in in tankers that have been aligned to the different characteristics of blended fuel of alcohol? See, these are steel tankers that they're being done,
Yeah.
and I don't know. I have never come across a very two tankers that are exactly the same spec. They may be certified. They'll show you the paperwork, but if you actually look at the vehicle and physically check them out, very, very different. Here we are checking the vehicles. You're asking, are these pipes and everything alcohol? I mean, are they compatible to the alcohol, endurance that they have to do for longer usage of alcohol in their blend? What about the tankards? Are they ready? E10 and E20 are very different. E10 has a certain characteristic, E20 has a certain characteristic. Are they ready for that? What about the storage tanks at the fuel pumps? They have to have air vents. They have to have, silica gel, which is used to prevent any kind of water ingress. Are they testing that more rigorously? And then when it's being dispensed and when it's being, sort of handled, are there certain precautions? I would love to see the oil company give me those specs, provide a protocol that they are following.
Yeah.
What are the routine checks that they have enhanced to provide that? Because if you see the challenges that are happening, this contamination is basically the large vulnerability that has come with this fuel. But that's not a vulnerability. That was always a characteristic. If the engineering in vehicles can be modified, what
Mhm.
is the engineering and the storage and the handling and the dispensing and all the other aspects that are required? Now, the variability in that is also very high because there are many other there's a whole chain of people, franchises that are involved. In the vehicle manufacturing, at least there's one single window that you can contact. But
Yeah.
who do you go to? And this is where the frustration has come out from customers. Is it the fuel? Is it the vehicle? The vehicle manufacturer is the easiest one to handle because they're easy to contact. Now, if I believe there is vehicle contamination or water ingress in my fuel,
Mhm.
who do I go to? Secondly, where does the oil company or the fuel, the oil sort of the distributor Can you tell me how he handles if there is contamination in his fuel in his tankard? How does he handle that? Because that's a huge expense. That's about 10,000, 5,000 liters. How does he dispose of it, or how does he sort of, purify it, or, what does he do? That's really, I think, where the questions need to be asked. Because the fuel usage and the fuel management systems that are there in vehicles, very tolerant, very, very sophisticated, they can manage it. But the contamination levels are something which is very unique in India, and we need to modify and maybe update standards and operating procedures and the protocols in the logistics and in the handling of such issues in a much more way. When does a oil company, for example, say that this fuel is not something that can be dispensed because there's a problem in the way it was stored? I don't think I've come across any kind of information that just demonstrates that. As far as the manufacturers are concerned, they're telling us, yes, these are type approved. The vehicles are certified. When they leave the plant, we are, providing all these different specifications for that. They're registered according to that declaration. So really, let's be clear. This is a ecosystem challenge. The manner in which all of these elements should have been in sync, come together, and then most importantly, if there were problems which were bound to happen, what would be the recourse for our customers? Who should they go to? Should they go to the auto manufacturers if they come across? What are the symptoms they need to watch out for? What are some of the inspections that they must do to understand whether their vehicle is suitable for E20? What are some of the technicians that are there front facing all these? How do they explain to customers that they do an inspection? There could be certain wear and tear. There could be some preventive items. Yes, some things would have to be changed. Some of the hoses from the old vehicles we done. But let me tell you one very important aspect. It's not the fuel that may be at fault at all times. Everybody is putting the blame on that because I think that's the big change everybody knows about. It's simple to understand. But some of these issues that we're facing could be a vehicle's 8 or 9 years old. They were already in a timeline where a certain replacement may have to be needed. Whereas some of the alcohol blended fuel may have just accelerated that and brought it ahead. But they were already in a vehicle that's 8, 9 years old. We can't just look at one data point. We have to look at the whole history. We have to look at the other compatibilities that are there and see the suitability and then decide replacement, changes, and other aspects, which could be minor. But we are now responsible for our vehicles to check and inspect, and the automakers can provide that guidance. The technicians can provide the guidance. But on the quality of fuel, we need some recourse with the oil companies.
And so, one of the major concerns with regards to the ethanol is among the consumers is regards to the mileage and the engine performance. Now, the government has stated that the mileage impact is somewhere between 3 to 5%. So, do you agree with that assessment, or do your assessment say that it's much more the impact on the
So,
mileage?
yeah. So let's for a new vehicle, it could be that much. Why? Because, okay, let's say that the overall calibration, everything is more or less set to the factory default values. In older vehicles, there could be a lot of compounding effects. It's not just the fuel. It could be the wear and tear. It could be the driving conditions. It could be, clogging of their fuel injectors, their filters. There could be a host of reasons, tire pressure. So the point I may want to make is that every case is unique. It's not just the fuel that is at point, but yes, there is going to be a mileage drop. And that mileage drop is purely from a physical and a chemical characteristics of ethanol. It has got a lower energy value per liter compared to the fossil fuels, and therefore there is that effect. But it can get compounded further by the condition of the vehicle. And those conditions can add to these additive effects that you're seeing getting to a much higher. So while we change the fuel, we also need to see and check the other aspects of our vehicle and understand whether there's been some kind of impact from those that may need some servicing or maintenance aspects to bring it back to a considerable level. But vehicle history, your mileage, your driving conditions, it should be compared apple to apple, not just go by this 3 to 5%.
So, sir, on the flex fuel part, so government has recently launched E85 as of now, which is for the flex fuel vehicles is something that is applicable to that kind of fuel. Now, the government has priced that E85 fuel around rupees 20 less than what the regular fuel is, E20 fuel that we are getting. So, do you think that the pricing of less than 20, given that the impact on the mileage and everything, that 20 difference is suffice for a consumer to make that decision?
So, so this is something I always like people to appreciate, that pricing is not necessarily just a mathematical cost price and add a margin. No, pricing is very important in marketing for your positioning and for a certain impact that you want to do. So if you think about it, you're anchored to the pricing today of your blended fuel. And therefore, to just show that there's a difference or a saving, and I'm making it up, you come to a value of 20 rupees, for example. And that's fine. Pricing is strategic. Pricing does not have to be. Now, if you want people to move towards E85 because there's the benefits, other benefits that are going to come from that, you've done this token amount, 20 rupees, for example. But to be honest, there has to be a much better and a much more sophisticated model that has to determine, because there's a lot of economic impact, there's environmental impact, there is the whole there is the cost of all this technology, but then there is a whole host of value that is coming from from energy security, from the fact that it is supporting agriculture, that there is so it's a very complex model. So I don't think this 20 has been done with the view to sort of really offset the maths of the mileage. It's being done just to show that, okay, fine, choose this fuel over this one. There's a decoy. There's a decoy in the real price. Go down a little bit and choose this one. Now, I don't think that's a good idea, because why? If people start using E85, not realizing that their engine is not just because it's cheaper, you can have
Mhm.
more damage happening. So there needs to be a lot more awareness to be done. There's a certain extra cost to flexi fuel, right? Vehicles. There's an intrinsic cost in the initial price of the vehicle. Why? Because there's a host of other technology that has been done. There's a host of other maintenance things that you'll have to sustain and replace as required, right? So the point is that any kind of decision with regards to pricing is turning out to be a policy decision that needs to be done. But then the option, if you must have on the fuel, must be offered 85 versus others, because they can only be for flexi. They cannot be used even by mistake. If they go into another vehicle, it can cause a tremendous amount of damage and possible failures. And therefore, we need to be very cognizant that this is not just engineering, it's a communication, it's a distribution, and it's a readiness and awareness of the customers that need to understand where this fuel is coming from. Everywhere in the world, wherever flexi fuel vehicles are there and flexi fuel is offered, 85, 100, there are separate dispensers, there's separate options, and all of that is made aware to clients and customers, and they fully understand the options for whatever reason, economic, environmental, and others, that they're choosing that fuel.
And so one of the arguments that the government has been given, especially this since the West Asia conflict, is that the ethanol has saved India thousands of crores of rupees in the import bill, which would have been has to borne by the government. Now, given the fact that yes, it has reduced a certain amount of import bill, is there any evidence to show that the ethanol blend fuel E20, say for example, give vehicle owners some kind of benefit economically in terms of fuel efficiency or operational cost? So is there a benefit for the consumers as well economically?
Again, unfortunately, this is all about very different factors that are being done for these decisions.
Yeah.
So, if I can be very blunt here, a successful energy, this is an energy transition, okay? And it should not only be technically sound, but it should also be perceived as fair. So, yes, as far as engineering is concerned, they will do this quietly. They will do it invisibly. You don't see all these changes, optically. They are very well done inside the engine and therefore flawless. You can be very assured that it is done. With regards to the economic, that's a very perceived value. And the customers and the users must find that out. Now, here, you're saying, oh, there's energy security, this is that, that is that, and thousands of crores being saved over here. It doesn't make a difference to me because the price is still the same. So, as far as an economic impact is concerned, yes, I'm getting a lower mileage. And you're getting this big benefit and you're not passing it any. So is that fair? Of course it's not. Customers don't see that fair. You're making 1,000 crores. What am I getting for it? Not even a rupee off. I'm still paying the same taxes for it. So this is a policy decision. This needs to be managed from a perception and from a point of view of what is your main objective. Do you want people to start adopting this fuel? Do you want them to quickly replace the fleet vehicles that they are? Be honest, be very clear, and show customers the benefit of an environmental collateral advantage in environment cleanliness and others. For let's say on electric vehicles, we say, oh, we're going to adopt 30% this much. Now you're going ahead and saying, okay, we'll take away registration tax. We'll we'll reduce the GST on it. What has it been done over here? You're telling me that agriculture is improving. It's sort of, Atma Nirbhar. It's improving, our resilience to other global factors, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, but what does it mean for me? And also, you still haven't explained to me if my vehicle is damaged, what am I supposed to do? Who's going to be accountable and who's going to be the person that I can call to support me on this one? You've not given me any subsidy for the replacement of parts that will make my vehicle suitable for E20. So this is what I meant by that the playbook that we used for earlier energy transition and fuel transition, we haven't adopted. Somewhere along the way, we dropped the ball. And this could have been very smooth. It's something that the whole world has done. India is a follower. India has never led in all these things. So why haven't we followed the same? Why was this hurry? Why was this scramble? And the oil companies have a lot to also explain in terms of what it is that they're doing. Let this be more honest, transparent. I think if all these benefits are going to accrue nationally, I think all of us would be more than willing to support. But tell us a scope, tell us a reason, not give us reassurances, give me confirmations and scope so that I can appreciate that the efforts that I'm doing or sacrifices I'm making are adding up to these benefits that will, maybe come over in the next few years.
And so, from the consumer point of view, now I understand, but from the vehicle manufacturer's point of view, so is there, because you must be in touch with some of them, so is there an issue that they are seeking in terms of, say, policy consistency? Because in so there's a lot of discussion around whether consumers or the manufacturer will take part of electric vehicle. There is CNG also. Now there is E20 blend petrol also. So what should, from a manufacturer's point of view, should be focused going forward? Do they see this issue or this debate around E20 putting more emphasis on, say, electric vehicles? Is the path of the future?
So, as vehicle manufacturers, we just want stability and a confirmation of a timeline. I think the point is that you can't just whimsically keep changing these standards. These are not things you can do overnight. This is not like cooking. You just change the few spices here and there. This is a whole engineering chain. They have to be tested, validated, and then batch product. The scale of these the volumes are much larger, and the stakes are much higher. So what is I think most auto manufacturers and OEMs are wary about that you keep changing them on the fly just because something has changed. Somebody feels that this is the better option. Some state has got one decision, some another state has got another one. Then the federal government decides another one. You can't have these kind of things because then these moving targets. What has happened? We'll stand still till something firm comes up. So the point is that if you want to go straight to electric vehicles and you want to avoid this flexi fuel, tell us. You can't have one state saying that we'll adopt flexi fuel. You have another state saying that now we're going to offer electric vehicles here and there. We're going to give special concessions for electric vehicle manufacturers. All these, how do you handle the legacy investors? The persons who've already invested hundreds of millions of dollars on flexi fuel vehicles. Now you're saying that we're going into electrical and we're going to give a 40% tax concession or subsidy for that. No, this is purely how policy is to be managed. The engineering part is a very straightforward management. They are very mathematical, very timeline based, and their investments already made. If there's a policy that you've done years earlier and people have committed, if you're changing a policy now, there must be a retrospective, offset to people who've already invested. They will have to make all that redundancy. There will have to be a lot of other, new investments to be done. You can't keep changing it so quickly. So this is not like electronics, unlike your mobile phone. But yes, you're right. Even OEMs have to be far more agile. They also have to be far more, flexible in their investments. But let's be frank, these are policy decisions that can change and impact economically a tremendous amount of effort already invested. They need to be very, very clear and stable. Unstable decisions, in fact, make OEMs wait and watch. They say, look, that's the whatever administration today is suggesting that. Tomorrow there may be another administration that will change the whole thing. There'll
Yeah.
be like this whole ethanol thing has happened very suddenly, yes, rapidly, but it is something which has been done rest of the world. So therefore, there is a certain, you can do that quite rapidly because the engineering's already been done. But for certain things like electric vehicles, which are more, there's more novel technology coming in, there's more rapid development and evolution still taking place. You just have to handle that with a certain amount of, I would say, empathy on how much investment, time, and effort is being required. And to those that have already invested, what is the recourse for them? Because they've done that based upon your policy announcements. And today you're saying you're turning away from them. So I think that's going to keep OEMs very wary.
And so finally, in the current parliament session that is going on, so the government has said a couple of things. So one, they have said that they are not currently looking beyond E20 blend petrol currently, and also that they have refused that at the dispensing stations they will not have E10 E5 petrol. There would be only E10 because that would lead to a multiple dispensing pump type. So like if you have to give advice to the consumers, what that would be for the E20 that is going to continue, and one advice for the government as well, that how they can manage it better going forward from here.
Okay. So agree. I think there's a host of ways but once again, I'll say the same thing. You've done this before. Please follow a similar pattern. There's a certain amount of time that is required and a certain amount of protocols and awareness that must be done. But most important, this is not an OEM change. This is an ecosystem change. Everyone in the whole network has to go. So first, to the point that you made, what about customers? What are some of the practical advice that I would suggest? Well, I would like to suggest 5 specific steps for people with E20 right now. Okay.
Yeah.
First is check your vehicle specific advisory for your vehicle. So this is something that I think all OEMs should do. They should categorize that, look, whatever batches of vehicle that are out there from this to this, these are suitable, these are not suitable, these are compatible, what possible inspections that they must do. Maybe they can offer a free inspection of vehicles, and then the customers can take suitable action that's required and maintenance action. I think the main thing is they're the only authoritative authority. Please do not go by what's there on social media and and general statements being made. It's finally the vehicle manufacturer that can authoritatively tell you whether your vehicle is compatible or not. The second is, yes, for the time being at least, yes, the biggest challenge I think that is changing in this blend was the water ingress part. And that is something that you must, is the network ready or not? I'm not sure. But at least from your vehicle, try not to go to empty in your tank, because the more airspace that is there, the more chances of more moisture coming in.
Yeah.
So do not allow your tank to go more than half and just fill it up to avoid that for the time being, because the residue really goes to the bottom of the tank. So that's really something that is practical, and it is very ethanol related in this thing. Third, if your vehicle specially is 8 or older than that, then please have your fuel hoses, your filters, your seals inspected. The rubber in that needs to be upgraded. It needs to be, a more polymer-based hose, and because that is something that is not designed for the kind of exposure to alcohol that I think your current vehicle will be done. And I think the more important part is that make sure that you remain proactive about it. Don't wait for a breakdown. That would be the other. Fourth, I would say is please buy your fuel from a reputed outlet, somewhere that you've been very has been proven reliable, and stay consistent on the quality, because it's not uniform everywhere. The systems, the standards, such they are very variable. But if you are able to find a reliable outlet and have had no problems so far, the chances are very high that they are following those procedures. Fifth, if you are really having a genuine problem and are going to your dealer, you go to authorized workstations or independent workstation, keep a record, because if there is a problem eventually later, that record is going to be very important for you to take it up either with the oil company or from the vehicle manufacturer, and you can determine very with the cause and effect, because we know it's not just the fuel. The vehicle history is also very important. So these are far as consumers are concerned. For the oil companies, I really want them to, I think they need to step up. They need to publish their quality assurance protocols. What have they done in this transition? Have they sort of upgraded? Because knowing that there is more sensitivity to certain characteristics of the physical and the chemical nature of this blended fuel, what are the protocols they follow from refinery? What is the blending protocols that they have done? And when it's going from blended to the tanker, from the tanker, the handling from the tanker to the storage tank. In the storage tank, what are the upgraded protocols that the petrol vendor is now doing to ensure that the hygroscopic properties are managed, and tell us what happens in case that whole fuel has been found to be contaminated. Is there a certain procedure that they're following? Because it's like saying that, look, maybe they're passing it back on to us. I don't know. And this is where that assurance, we have to just stop, just reassuring customers. We have to demonstrate it to them through confirmations. We have to show them what it is that is there. That is what will make this possible. This is a very large country. There are multiple oil companies, there are multiple vehicle manufacturers. But the point is, all these different permutations and combinations are going to result in a host of different misunderstandings. And the only way to show it is to be proactive in our communication, answer them before they are misunderstood, show the symptoms that are taking place, and show the actions that they need to do. Who can I call? Till such time, this will need to be done till such time that the older fleet of vehicles start getting replaced by the E20. And if you're going to go into flexi fuel E85, that will have to be done separately. That is the way it has been done all over the world. And I don't think India can be different. Yes, we may have different pressures. We may have different issues with our geopolitical and energy security. It's about the customer. They're the final users. It cannot be mandated the way this has been done. I
Yeah.
think this is where everyone has come up in arms, because you're reassuring people with new vehicles. You have done nothing to reassure people which are more than 4/5 of the vehicle population on the road today. What about them? So this is the point I always make. While you do something new, it also has to take care of everyone who is behind that line, cutoff line.
So I hope that oil marketing companies and the government and the consumers are all listening to your advice and they adhere to it. I think that this debate is far from over. I think this discussion will continue in the public domain for some time now. So thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us. I think you made some very valid points on this, and
No.
yeah.